As I look in the back here at Drew and Dudley, her a poodle in a zebra costume, and him a Care Bears knockoff wearing 3D glasses and a Pac-Man ghost on his tummy because of reasons, I'm reminded of that age-old saying, opposites attract. And it really is true. You would think that people would seek out people that remind them of them, or that are more in tune with, their emotional states or political beliefs or whatnot. But a lot of times you find that folks seek out people on the exact opposite end of the spectrum. Grumpy people end up with optimistic people. Studious bookworms end up with crazy artists. It even happens, in terms of friendship. My best friend in the entire world is a sarcastic pop culture spouting nerd with light brown hair. And of course, this has always been a shortcut in the entertainment industry. The odd couple has been a staple for as long as there have been entertainment. What if we get this person and this person who are complete opposites and put them together? Of course, Neil Simon perfected this with his classic play, The Odd Couple. You see it in sitcoms. The entire multi-million-dollar daytime TV empire is based on the very simple concept of, I can't believe anyone is actually fucking that person. All this complaining I do about daytime TV, you'd think I actually watch it. So of course, in the 80s, you knew it was only a matter of time before someone was going to say, let's take the biggest action star on the planet and team him up with a short, stocky comedian, and let's let the laughs unfold. And that, of course, became the premise for the 1988 film Twins, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito. A film that made famous for the simple fact that Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito were playing twin brothers, not identical twins, obviously. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about the story. So what is the story of Twins? Well, that's a complicated question to answer. I usually do the "Is this movie perfect?" bit at the end, and I will touch on that, but I think we're going to have to bring a little bit of it forward here in this section, because part of what makes this film supposedly not perfect is its story. So what is the story? Well, in the broad strokes, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito are twins separated at birth, and they find each other, but they're exact opposites. That's kind of it. That's what they base the entire joke on. It's a little bit more complex than that. Of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger's character of Julius is, of course, a perfect physical specimen. He was raised on an island by a loving professor. He is knowledgeable. He's compassionate, intelligent, just all around, just the greatest and most perfectest human being that could ever live. Danny DeVito's Vincent, on the other hand, is not any of those things. He was raised in an orphanage. He is cynical. He's a con man. He's a liar. He's a thief. And of course, when they get together, it's wacky because they're complete opposites. So that sounds like a pretty good premise to build your movie around. And of course, once they get together, they go on this journey to find their family and kind of, put their family together. Okay, good, right? Nice and simple. I mean, that sounds like something that you could build an hour-and-a-half comedy off of, right? Right. But here's the thing, and this is one of the weird reasons why I didn't quite go in for this movie right away. Because one of the things that stuck out in my mind is that, no, that is not the thing. This film actually has a much more complicated plot than you would assume. Because you can't just have Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger being twins. That's too simple. No, there must be a more complicated backstory to it. And indeed, there is. They're not just twins. They were subjects of a genetic experiment funded by the government to try to create a perfect human being. They had, I can't remember if it's, I think it's 6 or 7 different fathers. I don't know how that works, don't ask. Who contributed to this gene pool. And they tell their mother that she didn't know about Danny DeVito. She only knew about Arnold Schwarzenegger, but they told her he died at birth for reasons. They told him his mother died, giving birth to him for reasons that aren't really explained. For some bizarre reason, not only did they do this, but for some reason, the experiment was then shut down. Why? If your goal is to make a genetically perfect human being with all the intelligence and all the purity and all the physical attributes, you made Arnold Schwarzenegger. Clearly, your experiment worked. So why then was it shut down? They never answer this question. They never answer why all the lies and all of this, that, and the other thing. They hint vaguely that it's because she also gave birth to Danny DeVito, but that doesn't make sense. So there is this incredibly convoluted backstory going on. Add to that, so that's not enough, we got to add another plot on top of this, that Danny DeVito, to pay off his debts, is a car thief, and he accidentally steals a car with a stolen engine, a jet engine or something in the back, and then is trying to drive it to Texas, where he'll get paid $5 million for it, and the hitman who was supposed to drive the car is coming after them. So you've got that on top of all of this. There is just, for a movie with the absolute simplest premise you could think of, Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger are brothers, ho ho ho, how wacky. This thing has got one of the most convoluted fucking plots in all of 80s moviedom. And think about that for a second. Think about that statement. Think about the fucking 80s and the complexity of some of those damn films. And when I tell you this is one of the most convoluted plots of that time, really think about what that means. So here's the thing. I've spent the last couple minutes really dumping on this movie. And it almost makes it sound like I don't like this movie. It almost makes it sound like I don't actually kind of love this movie. Because here is the really weird thing. You want to know what the weirdest thing is? It fucking works. Almost all of these bizarre, out there plot threads and backstory and hitmen, and all, it almost completely and seamlessly fits together and makes a good movie. I don't know how. Fucking 80s, man. Only in the 80s could that work. Only in the 80s. So let's talk about what works about this movie. Well, I mean, what works about this movie is that the premise that they sold it on pays off. Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito work really well together. They have a unique chemistry that balances each other out. And I think it's smart casting. It's what I call the Jason Alexander principle. When Jerry Seinfeld was getting ready to do his show, he was smart enough to understand that he, Jerry Seinfeld, was not an actor. And that he really didn't feel comfortable trying to carry a storyline. His strength was making snarky remarks at other people. That's the bread and butter of his comedy. So he knew that what he needed was a sidekick. He needed somebody who was a better actor than he, that could carry the load of the story arcs. Hence, not only Julia Louis-Dreyfus, don't want to leave her out of that, but hence Jason Alexander as George Costanza, who was and is a phenomenal actor with amazing comic timing, and more to the point, he had excellent comic timing with Jerry Seinfeld. They melded together and worked well. You believed that these guys were friends. You believed that they'd known each other for years. And that is a chemistry that doesn't just happen, folks. That's not something you can hold an audition for. It either clicks or it doesn't sometimes. And that is what goes on with this movie. Danny DeVito is a good actor. And he's a unique actor. Arnold, who we're going to talk about here in a second, notoriously not an actor. He was a movie star. He had charisma, he had a unique look, but he was not an actor. And everybody kind of pointed that out now and especially then. So you give the emotional weight and the character arc to DeVito. And his character, his Julius or his Vincent, I get the names mixed up, funny. But his character is the one that actually goes through an arc and goes through a change. So you give that to him, and you let him kind of also guide Arnold through some of the more emotional and some of the comic scenes, since he was also a comedian. In wrestling, they always talk about, carrying the guy. If you have a young kid coming up who has a good look but is green, you put him in there with a veteran, a Bret Hart or Ric Flair, and let them carry the guy and make him look like $1 million. And, that is a lot of what is going on here. Danny DeVito is carrying a lot of this. It's a lot to put on his shoulders, and he does it so well because he is such a good actor. He kind of originated that charming scoundrel character. Again, a mold that George Costanza would take up a decade later. But I don't want to discount Arnold Schwarzenegger in this. Honestly, this is the best acting Arnold Schwarzenegger has ever done, in my opinion. Because he is an Italian coming out there. He is playing a character so very different from what his established archetype already was. Because up to this point, he was a Terminator. He was big guy, big action guy, come in, kill a bunch of guys, say a snippy quip, I lied. That was it. There wasn't a lot of acting going on in there. Here, the character is completely different. His character is, basically a buffoon. The perfect man's man who is raised on an island and has no concept of the real world. Incidentally, this is something we found incredibly funny in the 80s. I don't know why, but it was a trope that happened a lot with the manliest of man's men completely perplexed by the workings of the modern day. Crocodile Dundee is an example. So this movie is marinated a lot of weird things that we found oddly compelling in the 80s. I'll talk about a few more of them here in a second. And he plays this good-natured, out-of-his-league guy pretty well. It seems really genuine. Again, so far removed from anything that he had ever done. And I gotta give him credit that he himself does some pretty good acting in this. The best scene in this movie. So they're traveling across the country, and they find the place where they were born, where they were conceived, basically, both on a biblical and on a scientific plot-driven level. And they meet one of the scientists who worked on the project, and he basically explains that in their attempt to create the perfect person, when the embryo split to make twins, it didn't split evenly. All the purity, all the good genes went into Arnold Schwarzenegger, and all the garbage that was left over went into Danny DeVito. So naturally, Danny DeVito's character, who is already a mistrustful misanthrope, is basically just been told that your life doesn't mean shit. And there is a really excellent scene in the parking lot of the thing where Arnold Schwarzenegger is saying, you're not a piece of shit. You're not just what your genetics are, and it doesn't matter about any of that. We're gonna find our mom, and we're gonna be a family. It's a family where you're always welcome, and we'll never turn our backs on you. And first of all, on Arnold's part, it's a great scene because you're giving him a monologue, an emotional monologue. You know? And he's pulling it off. He's pulling it off pretty well, I gotta say. And the other acting going on Danny DeVito's part of this guy who is just been told that his life amounts to nothing, essentially. That he really was unwanted and undesirable from the moment he was born, kind of letting the walls down and going, you know, maybe I could be loved somewhere. It's actually a pretty touching scene, and those guys do an excellent job in it. Yeah, like I say, somehow this bizarre plot, it works. I think a special shout out also needs to go to the love interests. Sister characters played by Kelly Preston and Chloe Webb, who have that undesirable distinction of having to be the girlfriend characters to two much bigger stars. And that's another 80s trope that happened a lot. You have an action movie or you have something with a really big star, don't get a equally big star to play opposite them. Get them, you know, a lesser known character actor. I looked both these ladies up. They've had extensive careers. They've done a lot of guest spots. You know, they're reliable hands, but they're not names. You know, and that's how Hollywood treated the love interests back then. You know, and it's unfair in a lot of ways. But I have to say, both these ladies equip themselves very well and play opposite their respective male counterpart very, very well. Chloe Webb plays Danny DeVito's girlfriend, and Kelly Preston plays her sister, who, of course, takes one look at Arnold Schwarzenegger and, you know, falls in love. They play off each other, and you can see how the matches work, and that's not easy to do, and that's a thankless task in a movie like this, especially then. So I want to say, ladies, you did a great job, and you know, you helped give the movie some kind of emotional core. So good on you. They have a dance number in this, another song to add to the Forgotten Gems soundtrack album. They have a dance number in a bar in Texas where they dance to the song "I Die for This Dance." And I remember this song from the soundtrack very, very clearly. It's a really pretty song. And another one that, as far as I know, never released anywhere. I mean, they released it on the soundtrack album, the tape, the audio cassette, but it was never released on CD. I don't think there's a digital copy of it really anywhere except bootleg copies. I had to make a bootleg copy of it for myself. But a lovely song and a funny little dance number. So, yeah, don't ask me how all of these pieces come together and form a coherent whole, but for, I'd say, 85% of it does. So, we're bookending here. So, is this movie perfect? Well, no. I talked about kind of the plot issues. But I also said that most of the plot works. The element that doesn't work in the plot is this weird sub-story about the hitman who is supposed to deliver the stolen engine but who's chasing after them. That doesn't work for me, especially when you consider they already had bad guys chasing after them in the form of this family that Danny DeVito owed money to. So you already have those bad guys chasing after them. Did you need this other bad guy who feels like he's a dime store version of a basic Arnold villain chasing after them? It really does. 80s movies had this thing of jumping the shark right at the climax. You know, you could go along and suspend your disbelief, but then at the end they really felt they had to have a action-heavy climax. And so a lot of them had these weird shoehorned in villains and subplots. And it's very out of place here. I talked a little bit about 80s tropes. You know what else was a big thing in the 80s? This idea, and I don't know if this still has any weight. I don't know of anybody who's really thinking this way anymore. But we had this weird belief in the 80s that twins, and especially identical twins, could somehow feel each other's pain. You know, that they had a psychic bond. I remember Unsolved Mysteries did a whole segment on it once. You know, can twins, feel each other? You know, and they do this whole thing of, again, at the end, after kind of a falling out happens, and Danny DeVito runs off, and Arnold Schwarzenegger's looking for him again. Where it's like a psychic fucking thing. Danny DeVito burns his hand on a cup of coffee, and Arnold's like, or Danny DeVito's driving, and he does this thing, and Arnold Schwarzenegger has to stop and put his briefcase down and go. It's like, when the fuck did this happen? It's bad when Danny DeVito in the movie comments on it. He says, thanks to you, I'm not only a goddamn psychic. It's like, when the fuck did this happen? You've gone from little things like, Arnold Schwarzenegger can guess how much money he owes, or Danny DeVito named his cat Julius. Little twinges, you're like, okay, that's stretching a little. So now they fucking have an X-Men thing going on here. I mean, it was a big thing in the 80s. I don't know why we were so... The twins, I know. If this is true, if you have a psychic link or something, I apologize. But, it is something that just, again, 80s movies felt they had to push their concept as hard as they could. And just seeing where the breaking point was. So, it's a little wonky. It doesn't hang together completely well. But considering how many bizarre parts that they hung on this, despite all of the convoluted backstory, the additional subplots, and everything, the movie works. It is better than I remember it being. I had a great time rewatching this last night, and I was kind of hesitant, because this is one I pulled out and was like, I don't know if this is as good as I think it is, because, again, all I could think of was this convoluted plot, and watched it and went, no, it fucking works. For the most part, it fucking works. Here's the only thing I'm going to end on, the thing I want to leave with. A short while ago, the great Peter Dinklage said that he would love to remake Twins with Jason Momoa. And as opposed as I am in principle to just about every remake or reboot or reimagining or whatever, I'm going to say this. I think that's a brilliant fucking idea. I would pay money to see that. So, I'm on board with that. I think they should make that happen. I am fully in support of that idea. I think it would be quite special. So, there it is. That's Twins, and I hope you enjoy it. Hope everyone's doing well. Hope everyone's keeping safe. We're dragging through it, folks. We're getting through it day by day, one step at a time, one movie at a time. So, as always, keep calm and soldier on, and also, as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.